Bismillahirrahmanirrahim and Assalamu alaikum, dear students. In our past classes, we have been talking about different aspects through different, debates and discussions on, the written communication, the persuasive writing, and of course the journalistic, writing and communication. Today in this class, I would like to give you some glimpses of what actually, we have achieved, what we have gained, and what we have mastered through this journalistic writing this course. I'll start, of course, from the importance of writing today, and I'd like to quote Stanford University's, Professor Donald Norman. And if you remember, his quite effective words about what actually writing is and what role it can, it has played and it can play, in our life. Let's take a look. The invention of writing is probably the most important tool for human advancement, making it possible for each new generation to build upon the work of the previous, transmit knowledge from the person to person across cultures and time. With this, of course, writing is what? Writing is practical, writing is job-related. If you know this craft of writing, or this craft, if you know, of course, you can win lots of jobs, in the world of course, newspapers, television stations, radio stations, public relationing, offices, and of course, advertising agencies. And of course, writing is what? Writing is very social activity, highly stimulating, and of course, it's therapeutic. If I talk about the qualities of a good writer, then of course, the King's English and F.W. Fowler is, telling us, of course, some, I would say, pearl-like, expensive words when he says, anyone who wishes to produce a good writing should endeavor, before he allows himself to be tempted by the more showy qualities, to be direct, simple, brief, vigorous, and lucid. Well, who is a good writer? Good writer is the one who is, fundamentally speaking, an effective communicator, actually. Effective and meaningful communicator. Number one, this is first and the foremost, I would say, requisite for a person to be titled as a good and effective writer. He should be, first of all, effective, communicator. Number two, good writer is the one who is a fact finder. Especially if you are a journalist, then you know the meanings of what actually fact finding is. You know the meanings and you know the difference only between objectivity, fairness, and of course, subjectivity. And of course, good writer has his strong focus on his readers, on the purpose of his writing, and of course, he is context sensitive. I mean, he does not only write for, his any, specific reader, not only his specific reader, but he also writes through, some contexts. Of course, contexts are sensitive, contexts are non-sensitive, So he is context sensitive, he is, purpose sensitive, and he is reader sensitive or reader oriented. And then a good writer is the one who is an influencer of readers' behavior, human behavior. And last of all, good writer is the one who knows his medium. Whatever language he is, of course, communicating through or with the help of, he knows the art of that language. He has mastered, of course, that medium. Doesn't matter you write Urdu or in English, whatever you write in, you got to master that. Then, of course, you can be a good writer. Let's now move towards what good writing is. Of course, when comes the question of good writing, people always talk about, some characteristics of good writing, like clarity, conciseness, cohesion, concreteness, completeness, courtesy, blah, blah, blah. But I would like to, read out for you Gower's, a few lines, who is speaking on what, good writing is. What he says, writing should be terse, simple, and direct. Terse, simple, and direct. And should avoid the use of the unusual, long-winded, stilted and circumlocutory phrases and words. And Fowler also adds, to this Gower's line, what he says is, when you are writing, what you're going to do? Well, you are going to prefer the familiar words, to the far-fetched ones. You're going to prefer the concrete word to the abstract. Familiar to the far-fetched. Concrete to the abstract. And you're going to, prefer single word to the circumlocution. I mean, single word to, let's say, inseparables. Single word to phrases. Single words to idioms, at times. And of course, you're going to prefer short word to the long. In other words, shortly spelled words to the longly spelled words. And finally, prefer the Saxon word to the Romance. I mean, prefer Anglo-Saxon, which is short, familiar, and of course, conversational, I would say, words to make you in the same manner, short, familiar, and conversational. Moving ahead, then we talked about, in this course, the importance of writing process. You may say, why there is need of any writing process? I would say there is a need of writing process for 3 logical reasons. Number 1, writing process will help you organize yourself and organize your thoughts. This is number 1. Number 2, it can help writers to avoid frustration and procrastination. And number 3, it can help writers to use their time productively and, of course, efficiently. Now, these are 3 fundamental reasons, which make this process important. And, of course, like in this course, we discussed 3-4 different writing processes, and then I recommended for you one, and then, we implemented the same writing process onto different journalistic genre. I mean, of course, our writing process is like, of 6 steps or 6 stages. But don't forget, I discussed with you other important writing processes also, like a process based on 3 steps: inputting, processing, and outputting. And there was one more organized, planning and organizing and activating, and then controlling. And then, pre-writing, writing, and, this post-writing. But our process was, I would say, in its perfect form, in the sense that it gives, focus on to every bit and piece of, this craft. Like 6 steps were invention, collection, organization, drafting, revising, and proofreading. So these were actually our 6 steps, that you choose your topic, narrow it down, you collect information from your internal sources, from your external sources, you yourself, external sources like libraries, like resource persons, internet, and, many more in the form of like, surveys. And then, organization, like outlining your information, deciding which one is relevant, which one is not relevant, and then outlining all, the pieces of your information, keeping, of course, your topic and the purpose, in your mind. And, of course, then comes, drafting. Then finally, sitting down, with a paper and a pen in your hand and, putting your ideas into those, words. And, of course, second last was revising, checking the facts and the figures, for the last time. And, of course, the proofreading thing, which is very important, in which, this is what actually, we learned in this class, that when we proofread, do not just like confine yourself only onto the checking of the spellings, actually. No, of course not. You're going to check the content. You're going to check, of course, the format. And, of course, you will be checking the mechanics. So this, like, we discussed towards what this writing process, was and, of course, is. And then, we move towards the world of grammar, actually. There, we didn't talk about grammar the way, like, people, teach or study in, typical classrooms. But, of course, we talked about grammatical sentence, actually. We did talk about parts of speech, if you remember. Parts of speech, these are 8, actually, items. And, we can divide these 8 items, of course, into 2, like picture words and function words. Picture words are those which carry ideas, like nouns, adjectives, verbs, and adverbs. And function words, of course, are, which perform functions, like they talk about, whether this action is in the past, or it's in the present, or it's in the future. Of course, they help you link up, the parts of your ideas. Of course, they help you, add certain elements to your sentence which could express abnormalities in the sense that, they are not neutral in expressing your feelings. They are rather expressing, out of the ordinary feelings, like when we talk about interjections, for example. So, picture words, as I said, noun, adjective, verb, and adverb. And function words were, of course, pronouns, determiner, conjunctions, and interjection. So, parts of speech, we talked about. And then, we discussed the basic clause patterns. We talked about, what actually a sentence is. A sentence is the one in which there is one actor, there is one, action, and a complete thought. This was the full definition of a sentence. And we discussed, that there are 5 basic clause patterns, like number 1, subject and verb, this clause. Number 2, subject, verb, and object. Now, object actually is verb completing element. Then, subject, verb, and complement. Complement again is a verb completing element, but here the verb is in what you say condition form. This is not an action verb, it's a condition verb. And then the 4th and the 5th. 4th was like subject, verb, and indirect object and direct object. And the last of all was subject, verb, object, and direct object. So these 5, basic clauses we talked about. And then we studied how to expand, our ideas through these 5 basic clause patterns. Of course, we expand by, introducing modifiers actually to our these clause patterns, or by combining these clauses with each other, like sentence types, of course. Like if we discuss first of all sentence types, there are of course 4 types of sentences. Simple are again the same basic clause patterns. And then you have compounds. Compounds means, when 2 clauses you put together. Of course, which clauses you put together? The ones, which are of course relevant, and they have any relationship, with each other. And number 3, complex sentence, in which 1 independent clause and 1 dependent clause. When I say independent clause, it means independent clause is the one which expresses a complete action and which can stand alone. And dependent clause is the one which does not express a complete idea unless it goes with the complete clause, and which cannot stand alone. So this we talked about in a complex sentence. When in compound sentence, you have 2 independent clauses. That means either you make or break the sentence. The both of the clauses, will stand, alone. And of course, they will convey, 2 independent ideas. Then, the 4th one, which we say multiple sentence. The multiple sentence means, compound and complex. The merger of compound and complex together. This is how we, discussed actually what are 4 different types of, sentences. Now, why we need types of sentences? Of course, as I told you before, we need the types of sentences for expansion. What we want to expand, of course, we want to expand our ideas, Let's now move towards the sentence purpose. Look, there are 4 sentence purposes. Number 1, declarative. Declarative means, when you make statements like I love you, I'm from Pakistan. Now, these are what? These are declarative, These are statements. And then imperatives. Imperatives means orders, commands. And then interrogative, questions, open or close questions. And the last of all, of course, exclamative sentences, which of course express your abrupt feelings, your desires. So these are the 4, purposes sentences convey. And last of all, modifiers. Look, there are 4 modifiers, which I of course, told you in this class. First of all, adjective, which of course modifies your noun. And then you have, adverbs, which modify, modify verbs and also adjectives. And then you have prepositional and then in the end you have appositives. Now these are the four modifiers, which of course we talked about in this class. These modifiers, of course, we can use anywhere in our sentence, especially I would say, these adverbs, they are in such the range of, adverbs, is too much that you really got to learn them like anything. As far as, these appositives concerned, these are just like, bracket information actually. Of course, you can, fix them up anywhere. Frankly speaking, all these modifiers, they help you tie up your ideas, not simple ideas. If you want to express, complex ideas, of course, you'll be needing two things. Number one, you'll be needing lots of modifiers. Modifiers not to add, any passive information, active, factual information, Of course, in journalistic writing, as we were talking about, tabloids and broadsheets over there, like in tabloids, they add modifiers to sensationalize, whereas broadsheet newspapers, they add modifiers to factualize. So this was actually one important difference, which we discussed in this class. Now, let's move then towards our next topic, which we discussed in this course. That was reported speech, very important one. In this reported speech, what we studied how to change our, direct speeches into indirect, or indirect into, of course, direct. How to introduce direct quotes, direct speeches in your writing. And, of course, we learned, how to how to change, direct speech into indirect. Of course, you studied that there are three major changes, which actually take place in it. First of all, pronouns change, and then, time signifiers change, and then, of course, verb change. When we say pronoun change, change, it means the inside the commas, the speech is there, that like the pronouns of inside commas, they are going to be changed according to you can say the part of the sentence out of the comma, the pronouns which are there. Like the first person pronoun inside the comma is changed according to the subject of the outside comma information, and then the second person pronoun inside the commas, is changed according to the object of the outside comma, line. And of course, if there is any third person pronoun inside the comma, that of course we don't change. And as far as, of course, time signifiers, change is concerned, we studied that we move from present, of course, to past. If we, let's say there is now time signifier, we change now into, then, this into, that, today into, let's say, that day or previous day. So this is how, we change our, time signifiers. Then comes, of course, the verb thing. I mean, if there is present, it moves into the past. So we say, the verbs in, when we change from direct into indirect, we move a step backward, actually. I mean, if something is past, we change present, we change it into past. If something is already past, we change it into further past. Then we talked about, different other types of sentences, like interrogatives, for example. How to change them, into, let's say, reported from direct, let's say, to indirect speech, for example. As you know, there are two types of questions, like questions starting with, helping verbs, and questions, starting with WH questions. Now, these are two different types of questions, which we, like, if they are, like, in your sentence and you need to change them from direct, let's say, into indirect, then what to do? As you know, I mean, if the question is, or the sentence is taking its start from, helping verb question maker, for example, then the connector, like we use, that, for example, at the place of that, we'll be using if and or whether, and then, of course, the remaining sentence will be there. But if it's a WH question, then, we don't need any connector. We don't use that, we don't use if, we don't use whether. Simply, you'll start the second part of your sentence from the what, and then you will change, the pattern of your sentence as like subject first, verb second, and then object third. So this is how, like, reported speech we discussed. Then, we move towards discussing the grammatical sentence, actually, and we discussed, 5 very important, aspects of grammatical sentence. Like the first of all, subject-verb agreement, that every subject has to agree with its own verb, not with any word, which is present in between, before or after. So this was number 1. Number 2, problems with pronouns, that each and every pronoun has to agree with its own antecedent. So this thing, if it's, let's say, you can say compound, nouns have been used, and when the pronoun comes, it has to be in the form of plural, not singular. Why the nouns are in plural form, the pronouns are going to be also in plural form. So this thing. And the third one, adjectives and adverbs. Like we use adjectives to modify nouns only. Now, what are nouns? Nouns are, of course, persons, places, and things. Adjectives only modify, nouns. Adjectives do not modify, let's say, adverbs. However, adverb is something, which, first of all, primarily speaking, modifies the verb. And then, of course, adverb can also modify, adjectives. Then, here in the same point, we discussed, how we form degrees, actually. So we discussed, like, degrees are regular and irregular. Regular, like, for example, big, bigger, and biggest. Now, this is a regular, like, form and frame. There are some, irregular, for example, good, better, best, where all the 3 words, they're in different, of course, form, and different words, actually, in a way. So, and then we discussed, like, there are comparative degrees, superlative degrees. Comparative degrees, compare 2 things. Superlative degrees, they compare one with the rest. And we also talked about, how we make comparative, comparative and superlative degrees. We studied there that if there is, let's say, a word with 1 syllable, for example, its comparative degree is with ER, and superlative is with EST. But if they are, like, let's say, words with, 2 syllables or more than 2 syllables, for example, then this comparative will be with more and superlative with the most. And if there is any word which has 2 syllables or more than 2 syllables and ending at Y, for example, let's say easy. Easy has 2 syllables ending at Y. Its comparative is IER, and, superlative will be IEST. So this is what actually, we discussed about adjectives and adverbs. Then, we said sentence fragments also. We talked about that, if there are any sentence fragments, for example, then what? You have 2 options. Either connect them logically, pragmatically, or, make 2 new sentences. Let's say there are 2 fragments. You can connect them if you find any relevance, in there. If you don't find any relevance, for example, then, of course, you can, phrase 2 independent sentences. Then, we discussed another 2 very important, a little, complicated aspects of grammatical sentence. That was comma splice and fused sentence. Like, I would like to highlight these 2 points with the help of an example. For example, when we say, you work hard, you pass. Now, this is 1 sentence, these are 2 clauses, and they are not, punctuated with comma, for example. When there is no comma, then, of course, we'll say, like, what? I mean, even, like, the sentence is fused, actually, see? Because there is no any punctuation mark in it. Though these are 2 independent clauses, there is no punctuation mark, there is only a full stop. So 2 clauses, maybe 1 clause is dependent, 2nd clause is independent, So there is no any sign and symptom of, like, their, their, like, relationship, actually. So it's called fusion. So if you put comma, for example, between 2, like, let's say, you work hard, comma, you will pass. Now, this will become from fuse sentence to comma splice, but actual sentence will be, you will pass if you work hard. So this kind of, like, understanding, of course, I gave you, when we discussed, grammatical sentence. And then we talked about effective sentence also. And in effective sentence, we discussed, 5 very important features, like sentence length. To be effective and meaningful, I said sentence length should be 17, to 20 words. And at maximum can be 25 words. But its range is, 3 to 30. This we discussed. Then unity, like sentence should have unity. I mean, if there are like two clauses in a sentence, they should be highly unified. They should both together one single idea. Then coherence and cohesion we discussed. Like sentence should be very much connected. I mean, the parts of, a sentence should be very much connected with each other. And of course, if there are any modifiers, you're using in your sentence, they should be put very, close to the parts they are modifying. So that important thing. Then emphasis. Every sentence has its own emphasis, and emphasis should be on the right place. When you are, like, let's say you are, into a complex maker, for example, there are two clauses. And then, you have to ask yourself which part, of course, the independent part, should be emphasized more. And if in the case of compound sentence, for example, then you will be difficulty actually in deciding that, which part should be emphasized, more. If you remember, I gave you one example that the airplane reached the speed of sound and it was difficult to control. And one was cause and second was effect. And, the effect of the cause should enjoy the emphasis. And if you remember, the sentence actually corrected was, as it reached the speed of sound, the airplane, was difficult to control. So this stuff, if you remember, like, we discussed. And of course, the last one, parallelism, like all the parts of your sentence, should be, of course, in parallel with each other. If you're starting your sentence, let's say from present participle, then every other, like, verb, if it's present in that sentence, it has to be in present, participle form. If it's an infinitive start, then the rest of all verbs, should be in infinitive, of course, form. And then comes what? Style pitfalls. Dear students, if you remember, we talked about, what actually style is and what are the do's and don'ts of style. And in don'ts, I discussed with you some 10, 12, stylistical pitfalls. Of course, style is what? Proper words at proper, places. Whatever you want to say, and don't say, more. That's actually the functionary of, this style thing. And style tells us what? It tells us that, don't use wordy expressions and, do not overstate and use, guide posting, blah, blah, blah. But important focus, of course, should be on to the stylistical pitfalls. That the very, I would say, important point in stylistical pitfall I discussed with you was colloquialism. That when you are into formal writing, for example, you are not going to use any informal words or informal structures. You are going to be formal, then no colloquialism should creep into your writing. No such words, which could be considered as less formal. Try to stick to the formality. Of course, who decides the formality? Your reader decides actually the formality. The relationship, between your reader, and the writer, of course, writer and reader, they're like, of course, formality is, taken due, care about. And of course, if you remember, in our later classes, when we discussed the difference between your newspapers, tabloids, and broadsheets, of course, and if you remember, the tabloid, it's the quality of the tabloid, actually, that it uses lots and lots of colloquialism. Colloquial, like, structures, colloquial expressions, colloquial, of course, lexical chunks. Whereas broadsheet newspapers, it does not borrow anything from, colloquial. The second stylistical pitfall was circumlocution. Circumlocution, if you remember, is, too much for too little. I mean, such words, such expressions, which are not based on one word, actually, rather they are based on, you can say like you can say in phrasal form, actually, composed of smaller other words as well, then which of course introduces in a way wordiness in your sentence. So circumlocution is another very, very big pitfall we have to, of course, stay away from. And then was ambiguity. I mean, such words which you use which can have double meanings, for example. So this is how you can confuse them. Some people, like, use this ambiguity intentionally also, for example, then there is no place for ambiguity. You have to revise your message, you have to proofread your message, that your message is compact and your message is in that desired form in which the ultimate goal is efficacy and the meaningfulness of your message. And then, redundancy we talked about. Any repetition, of course, it has to be like eliminated, from your writing. Cliches, such words, which do not add nothing to your writing. I mean, such expressions, which are stale, such expressions, which have been overused actually and they've lost their impression. They have to be shown the way out from your passages. And then comes, euphemism. I mean, unnecessarily, when you adopt indirect approaches in your writing. No way. And then grandiloquence. I mean, the color. I mean, when you use Latinate words actually to add color to your writing, actually, grandiloquence, frankly speaking, acts as a wall, between you as writer and they as your readers. And then what happens, the block. I mean, the meanings, they are, of course, blocked. The actual purpose, it simply dies out, somewhere. Don't do that, of course. And then inseparables. No need to use inseparables. Such words, which you cannot separate. In the case of, economy of your expression or word economics, for example, that would stop you using inseparables. Slang, like colloquialism, no place for slangs. And, of course, verbage, using too many verbs for for nothing, actually. That, of course, has to be, avoided in our writing. After discussing grammatical sentence, effective sentence, and then stylistical pitfalls, we move towards paragraph writing and essay writing. Now, what paragraphs are? Of course, paragraph means, group of sentences. Which sentences, of course, which are, of course, relevant with each other, which enjoy unity, which enjoy coherence, and there is one logical development, I mean, ideas, they flow out from every previous one. So this is how, we, of course, construct paragraph. We discussed, 4 types of paragraphs. The one, very simple listing, paragraph, in which you simply list out things, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the second was order of importance paragraph. You start from the most important, then second important, then third important, and then, something which is least important. So this is order of importance paragraph. The third paragraph style or the type was time order paragraph, in which, of course, you write chronologically. You move from past to present, or you move in the sequence of, incidents or events. Something which happened first, you discuss it that, then happened second, then third, then fourth, then fifth. For example, you visited, let's say, Lahore first, and then Rawalpindi second, then Peshawar third. So, of course, you will be, of course, talking first about Lahore, then Rawalpindi, and then Peshawar. This is what we call time order, paragraph. And the fourth one was spatial order paragraph, in which, you describe spaces. You talk about the 4 walls, you talk about the floor and the ceiling, you talk about the center, you talk about the inside, you talk about the outside. So this type of, so these were the 4 basic, paragraph types. And then, we moved into what we call as multi-paragraph composition, which we call, of course, essays. Essay is what? Which is, of course, composed of at least 3 paragraphs. In essay writing, I discussed one very important thing with you, that don't jump, starting writing your essay. Rather, analyze the question statement. What actually question statement, offers you? It offers you 2 very important things. It offers you strategy. When you find words like these, analyze. When you find words, let's say discuss. When you find words, let's say describe. Stuff like this, this is called strategy. And of course, I discussed with you in essay writing different strategies also, like when we say compare, what actually compare means. When we say contrast, what actually we mean by contrast? What is describe? What is discuss? What is illustrate? What is argue? So these strategies, we discussed in the class. And the second important thing is what, essay topic tells you. That is, the terms of question. Terms of question means, what different aspects you are going to talk about, in your, the whole essay. These terms of questions are basically the prompts of your essay. The major points in which you are going to talk about. Doesn't matter you are writing descriptive, narrative, or expository or what. These terms of questions, of course, they guide you, they hold you, they do not let you digress actually. And then, we discussed high impact language side by side with, essay writing. And we said high impact language is a name of three, important things. Number one, high impact words. What are high impact words? Of course, high impact words are Anglo-Saxon, easy, conversational. And of course, words which are compact, words which are one word substituted, they are not wordy actually. That's called, high impact word choice. Then you have, high impact, let's say, sentences. Now, what are high impact sentences? Look, when we use simple sentences and we mix simple sentences with complex sentences, impact of our writing is very high. But when you use simple sentences and you mix simple with the compound sentences, impact of your writing goes down. So high impact structures are what? High impact structures are combination of simple and complex. Number one, active sentences. Number two, this is something very much important. And number three, powerful actually verbs. That's, number three. And less use of adjectives actually as modifiers, because adjectives, of course, slow down your action, whereas verbs, they act as, accelerators in your, sentences. So, of course, we rely more on verbs, less on adjectives. So this is what actually, what we call as high impact, sentence choice. And the last of all, we discussed, what's high impact appearance. We said, short paragraphs, indented paragraphs, paragraphs with unity, and also, in case that, you have, multi-ideas in one paragraph, then, of course, you can, indent and itemize them. And, of course, white space is another thing. Have all white spaces possible inside your text. If white spaces are out of your text, you will find just a clutter. You'll find you can say sort of a brick wall thing, confusing, having no eye appeal. The moment you bring white space inside your text, what happens, your text becomes attractive. And then we move towards reports, descriptive writing, narrative writing, and of course the art of persuasion. In reports, reports are, orderly and objective communication of factual information. And of course, we discussed the format, of reports. We discussed three formats, like short reports in the form of letter report formats, memo report formats, and of course, the long reports, in the form of what you call manuscript, report formats. Different, aspects of it, we talked about. And then descriptive writing. Of course, we said, using words in such a way that writers, paint pictures. It's a very simple thing. Descriptive writers, what they do actually, they hold their reader's hand and they take them to the scene where, with their own eyes, they can see things happening. That's the quality of descriptive. Narrative is what? You narrate in such a way as if you were in the company of the writer. Stories you narrate in such a way, that you feel as if you were very much part and parcel of, that company. And here, the art of persuasion, we discussed in detail, the three very important points of the art of persuasion, ethos means ethics, pathos, means emotions, and logos means, of course, logic. Ethos means, from writer's side, the show of ethics, actually, ethical behavior, activated behavior. And from, the reader's side, for example, their emotional bindings, with different things. And of course, the sandwiched thing, which we say logos, the logical, the message has to be logically correct. And it should enjoy, to its maximum, the logical appeal. And of course, here we did discuss, like, what are rhetorical devices, how to change your ordinary messages into out of the ordinary, like, stuff. And we talked about, 4 rhetorical devices. Like, if you remember, number 1 was introduce parallelism in your writing. Number 2 was introduce triads. Actually, triad means, group of 3 words. And then antithesis, and the 4th one was rhetorical questions. You can ask questions to your reader, just to engage them. And then we move towards, research writing, and we talked about 2 international formats, APA and MLA. Of course, the fundamental concern of APA and MLA, of course, is 2, like reference page and, of course, parenthetical citations. All the books, all the journals, all the magazines, all the newspapers, all the websites, for example, which you consult full-fledged, and then it becomes your actually obligation to write and cite them in bibliography. See, and that, of course, bibliography, or you can say the reference page, of course, you tie up somewhere in towards the end of your report thing or research article thing or any research item thing. It's very much important. Once you have cited, no one can, of course, ask you, blame you, for plagiarism. And another very important thing, inside the text concerns, like if you're using any writers, for example, word or phrase or expression or line or paragraph or, multi-paragraph, for example, you have to there and then, like, tell whose writer's lines, you are using, which, of course, we say as parenthetical citations. Put and introduce a bracket. Inside that bracket, write the name of that writer and, of course, the year. If possible, of course, the page number. So this is how you come out of plagiarism. Please keep in mind this, when we say plagiarism, it just does not mean that, you are word to word when quoting. No, even if you are paraphrasing or even if you are summarizing, for example, someone's work, you have to give that writer's name and any possible information. If, the bibliographical information, of course, I've discussed with you, and the 3 pieces, if not 3, minimum 2, name of that author, surname, family name, and second thing, the year, okay? Or if possible, the page number. So this is something, very important. Then, of course, we talked about, reading skills. We discussed different strategies, actually, which we follow to increase our speed. And then we did talk about, academic reading. We did talk about, pleasure reading. We talked about knowledgeable reading. We talked about, purposeful reading. And I gave you a strategy that, read the topic first, then go to the questions, underline the keywords, come back to your, passage, read the first and the last sentence of every paragraph, then dip down the paragraphs, there, underline the bold types. Bold types are like italic words which are italicized, words which are underlined, words which are printed in bold, words, which are defined in brackets, any hyphenated items, any illustrations in the form of, pictures, any charts, graphs, all that stuff, you got to go through. And then, go back to the questions, and they're like, you go through questions again and try to, of course, answer. And we analyzed WH questions also, and I said, like, what, when, where, and who, for example. These are easy questions to answer. Sometimes, like, the difficulty, like, lies in when you answer reasoning in the form of, why, and processes in the form of how. So, of course, that really needs a sort of practice. And, of course, we talked about, that you can use reading to improve any language also. As I told you, that out of the 4 skills, like listening and speaking, reading and writing, that's the logical link, actually, in these. The mother skill, actually, the most important skill, actually, of course, is the reading, because reading has got every bit and piece of other skills also in it. So that you have. Then, we move towards punctuation and mechanics. Punctuation, of course, very important. Just imagine a sentence, just imagine a paragraph, with no punctuation marks. Of course, you will be lost. So you got to follow. That punctuation actually introduces sense of ease, to your writing. And also the same with mechanics, like, when we, for example, spelling's a big issue, and other like, let's say hyphens, for example, parentheses, for example, using numbers, for example, then of course the formats, all these things, of course, are of highly, are of great importance actually, which we need to learn, of course, and then implement, especially like, when we, proofread, our messages. There, of course, you need to check punctuation and mechanics, very carefully, so that, no any error, goes actually along with your writing to your reader, and there, of course, it's going to create bad impression. Then we swimmed into journalistic writing, and then I said, like, when you are going to analyze journalistic writing, you are going to check 6 important points, like register. Register is the name of mode, manner, and field. And then lexis, what type of words have been used. These words are like denotational, connotational. These words are literal, figurative. These words are, in wordy form or in one-word substitution form. These words are circumlocutional, blah, blah, blah. And then we talked about grammar thing, the type of sentences being used, simple, compound, complex, or multiple. Metaphorical language, figurative language actually is being used. Sources. Sources are official, unofficial, and then typographical features. How the news is made attractive actually. I mean, are there only headlines, or there are subheadlines, there are some strap lines, there is an indentation, or if there are some boxes introduced, or, some, bold types have been used, bold printing is there, so typographical features, all have to be screening sometimes, they use, or at times, they use different colors also to highlight, to make your news reports, stand off the whole, page, so that, it could really, single glance of the readers could, like, really win this reading. So these are 6 points, which you, of course, have to take care of. And then we talked about, newspaper-related writing. For example, first of all, news writing. And we discussed, like, news writing structure, of course, is an inverted pyramid. Means your headline first, then the lead, second lead answers what, when, and where. And then comes, your sportive details, including the nut graph. Nut graph answers, why so-and-so thing is important. And of course, in the end, a good wind-up. Of course, your news report, a good news report is the one, in which you punctuate your report with direct quotes from official or unofficial, like, sources, from government officials or from public, like, if when you quote the wordings. Of course, do not overquote. When you overquote, like, then things tend to look more subjective. We got to be, like, objective. So such quotes, like, which increase and enhance the objectivity and the factuality of your report, that, of course, has to go with. And then, we, of course, talked about editorial. We said, like, quite contrary to this news report, which is very objective, which is very, fair, whereas editorial is totally subjective thing. News reports, they are, of course, communicated the way they are, the way incidents are, whereas editorials, that's the point of view, that's the opinion, that's the stance, that's the policy, that's the ideology of course, the editorial board, which, of course, belongs to a newspaper, okay? So they are, like, written, of course, on objective issues, but with subjective, of course, opinions. And of course, I gave you a structure of an editorial that start from a situation, then move towards, your position, then give evidence, then discuss the contrast and refute. Contrast means, the other side which you are against, and cite that and refute it. And then in the end, of course, you're going to close it. Then we talked about, features. Of course, features are, of course, factual, and you can say this as feature is the real research writing. Feature is something, which involves all the procedures possible. You are going to, of course, write in features the way news are written. Then you are going to, use pictures, for example. You're going to use interviews also. You're going to use survey reports also. You can use illustrations as well, to add as much information as possible. And of course, features are written, on such stories which of course lack WH, and then, you do research, you dig out information, and you present for your readers. And this is how, like, you quench, their information thirst. And then letters to editors. Letters to editors, of course, they are written to editors, and that's the opinion of the public, And, of course, they can also win space in newspapers. Then we discussed reviews, how to write reviews on text, on objects, on different events, okay, and how to write reviews. Important thing in reviews is that reviews are not, summaries of, let's say, books, for example. They are the critical commentary or the analysis of the impartial person, like, who's writing a review of. And reviews actually provide people an understanding of that very work. And then obituary, how to write, death news, actually, and what are different components, which we have to, of course, take care of. And in the end, we talked about the art of interviews. We discussed the types of interviews. We discussed how to prepare for interview. And during interview, like, how should we start? How should we, like, take it towards the climax, and then how to wind it up? All that. And also we talked about, if there are some difficult interviewee, then, how to handle them. This was all about, your course, which we discussed through these many sessions. And today in this class, the real purpose was to refresh your memories and also to highlight some very important parts of this course. I hope you liked it. In the end, I wish you great success. I wish you, a good luck in not only your personal life, but also your academic and professional. God bless you, all of you. Khuda Hafiz.